He waited to feel confident before acting, but every delay made him smaller, until one tiny action proved belief isn't found. First, it's built afterward. The room felt quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that pressed gently against the ears, like something was missing but couldn't be named. A thin line of sunlight slipped through the half-open curtain, stretching across the floor and stopping just before his feet. He sat, still not relaxed, not calm, just still. His hands rested on his knees, fingers slightly curled, as if they wanted to move but didn't know how. His eyes were fixed on the floor, tracing faint patterns in the tiles again and again while the clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second louder than it should be. There was something he wanted to do. It wasn't big or impossible. It was simple, almost small, but in his mind, it felt heavy, like lifting something much larger than it should be. He leaned forward slightly, as if preparing to stand, then stopped. A quiet thought passed through his mind. Not yet. It was always the same. He believed he needed to feel ready for strong, certain, confident, but that feeling never came. So he waited and waited. The light on the floor slowly moved as the sun changed its angle. Dust floated softly in the air, drifting without direction. The room stayed the same, but something inside him kept tightening, little by little. Suddenly, he stood up, not with confidence, but like a reaction, as if his body moved before his mind could stop it. For a brief second, something felt different, but then it came back. That familiar hesitation. His shoulders dropped slightly, his posture softened, and the invisible weight returned. What if it goes wrong? The thought didn't shout, it whispered. And somehow, that made it stronger. He took a small step forward, then paused again. His eyes moved toward the window. Outside, people walked by, some talking, some melagin, some simply moving forward. They didn't look perfect or special, just normal. Just moving. He watched them quietly and wondered how they did it so his alley no unswear came. Only that same heavy feeling in his chest. He stepped back and sat down again. The chair made a soft sound, then silence returned. This wasn't the first time. It had happened again and again. Different days, same ending. He would think, plan, imagine, even picture himself succeeding, but when the moment came to act, everything inside him slowed down. His thoughts thickened, turning every possibility into a question, and every question into doubt. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? What if I'm just not that kind of person? That thought stayed the longest. Not that kind of person. It felt like a quiet label he never chose, but slowly accepted. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, noticing a faint crack in the corner, something he had seen many times before, because he often ended up here, doing the same thing. Thinking. Waiting. His breathing was slow, steady, but empty. Not calming, just automatic. The truth sat quietly inside him. He didn't trust himself. Not enough to act. And without action, nothing changed. His days blended together in a soft, repetitive loop. Wake up. Think, plan, delay, repeat. Sometimes he told himself he just needed more time, more clarity, more preparation. But deep down, there was something else. A quiet frustration. Not loud enough to break him, but strong enough to stay. It showed up in small ways: a tight jaw, longer pauses, eyes looking away when unsure. The light in the room faded as the day moved forward. Shadows stretched across the walls until the bright line on the floor disappeared completely. The room grew dim, but he didn't turn on the light. He sat there, letting the darkness slowly fill the space. Another thought came, soft and familiar. Maybe tomorrow. It sounded safe, reasonable, but also too familiar. Tomorrow had become a place where everything felt possible, but nothing ever happened. He closed his eyes, not to rest, but to escape. In his mind, he imagined a different version of himself, someone who moved without someone who didn't wait for the perfect feeling, someone who simply acted. That version didn't look very different. Same face, same voice, but lighter, freer. The image stayed for a moment, then slowly faded. Because imagining was easy, acting was not. When he opened his eyes again, the room was darker. Only a faint glow remained near the window. He looked at his hands. They hadn't changed. Nothing had, and yet something felt slightly different. Not better, not worse, just clearer. He realized something quietly every time he didn't act. He felt smaller, not physically, but inside. Like a tiny part of him stepped back each time he hesitated, and over time those small steps had added up. He leaned forward again, resting his elbows on his knees. This time, he didn't move right away. He simply noticed the feeling, the hesitation, the doubt, the weight. It was all still there. Nothing had disappeared, but for the first time, he didn't try to push it away. He didn't wait for it to leave. He just observed it, quietly, carefully, like seeing it clearly for the first time. Outside, faint footsteps passed again. The world was still moving, even if he wasn't. He took a slow breath, then another. His fingers tightened slightly, then relaxed. The room remained silent, now fully wrapped in darkness. But this time, it didn't feel as heavy. Just still. He looked toward the door, the same door he had looked at many times before. The same moment, the same choice. But something inside him felt just a little different, not braver, just less resistant. He stood up again. This time, the hesitation came as expected, the same thoughts, the same quiet fear. But he didn't wait for them to disappear. He didn't wait to feel ready. Slowly, with a small, uncertain movement, he took one step forward. Then, another. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden confidence, no instant change. The room stayed the same, the silence stayed the same, but something inside him shifted very slightly. Almost unnoticeable, but real. For the first time, he acted before believing. He reached for the door handle. His hand paused for just a second, then gently closed around it. The metal felt cool against his skin. He took a breath. Not deep or perfect, just enough. Then he opened the door. Outside, the air felt different, not magical, not overwhelming, just fresh. The same world he had been watching from a distance was now in front of him. People still walked, talked, moved forward. But now, so did he. The feeling didn't change instantly. Doubt was still there, but something new existed beside it. Proof. A small, quiet proof that he could move, even without feeling ready. And in that simple moment, he understood something deeply. Confidence had never been the starting point. It had been the result. Every small action was shaping something inside him. Every step, no matter how uncertain, was slowly building belief. Not all at once, not loudly, but steadily. He wasn't becoming someone new. He was building someone, one action at a time. And as he walked forward, not perfectly, not fearlessly, but willingly, he realized something that stayed with him longer than any doubt ever had. Belief doesn't come first. Action, dos. The air outside felt different, but not in a dramatic way. It wasn't lighter or magical. It was simply real. The sounds were clearer, the distant hum of movement. Soft footsteps, faint voices blending into the background. He stood there for a moment, just beyond the doorway, as if adjusting to a world he had always seen but never truly stepped into. His hand slowly released the door handle, and for a brief second, the thought of going back appeared again. It felt familiar, safe, almost comforting, but something stopped him this time. Not confidence, not courage, just a quiet awareness that going back would feel exactly the same as before. So he didn't. He took another step forward, then another. Each step felt small, almost insignificant, yet strangely heavy, like each one carried a decision inside it. His body remained slightly tense, his shoulders not fully relaxed, his breath not fully steady. The doubt was still there, walking beside him, whispering softly in the background. But now something else existed. To a small shift, not in the world, but in him. He kept walking, not with a clear destination, not with a perfect plan, just moving. The ground beneath his feet felt steady, and slowly, the rhythm of his steps became more natural, less forced. People passed by him just as before. Some didn't notice him. Some glanced briefly and moved on. Nothing extraordinary happened. The world did not pause or react, and yet, something important was happening quietly inside him. A thought appeared, soft but different from the usual ones. That wasn't impossible. It didn't arrive with excitement or energy. It simply settled into his mind, gently, like something finally finding its place. He walked a little further before slowing down. His eyes moved around, taking in details he had often ignored: the way light reflected off windows, the soft movement of leaves in the air, the uneven patterns on the ground. These were things he had seen many times before, but never truly noticed, because his attention had always been trapped inside his thoughts. Now, for the first time in a long while, his awareness expanded outward, and it felt unfamiliar, yet calm. He stopped walking, not out of fear, but simply to notice. His chest rose and fell slowly. The tension in his body was still there, but it no longer controlled him the same way. It existed, but it didn't decide for him. A realization began to form, slowly connecting with what he had just experienced. He hadn't felt ready. He hadn't felt confident, and yet he had moved anyway. That simple truth stayed with him. He turned slightly, looking back at the door he had walked through. It didn't look different. It wasn't far away. But the meaning had changed. For a long time, it had been a boundary. Now, it was just a door. He looked forward again. The path ahead wasn't clear. There was no perfect direction, no complete plan. But for the first time, that didn't feel like a problem. He didn't need the whole path. He only needed the next step. With that quiet understanding, he began walking again. This time, his steps felt a little easier. Not effortless, but less resisted. The hesitation didn't disappear, but it weakened slightly, like a voice losing its strength when it was no longer obeyed. As he moved forward, another thought surfaced. What else have I been waiting for? It wasn't a question filled with regret, but curiosity. He began to see how many moments in his life had passed, in the same way as the one in the rudiments, where he waited for a feeling that never came. Moments where he believed he needed confidence before action. But now, that belief no longer felt complete, because what he had just experienced did not match it. He acted first, and something followed. Not confidence, not fully, but something close, a small sense of capability, a quiet proof that he could move even when unsure. He reached a slight curve in the path, and paused again. The world continued moving around him, unchanged. Nothing outside had shifted. But inside, something was rearranging itself. A deeper understanding began to settle. Maybe belief wasn't something you find. Maybe it was something you build. That idea stayed with him, not as a sudden breakthrough, but as something slowly becoming clear after being hidden for a long time. He noticed something else as well. The fear had not disappeared. It was still there, but quieter, and that changed everything. Because before, he believed fear needed to go away before he could act. Now, he understood that it could could still move forward. That realization didn't feel overwhelming or dramatic. It felt steady and real, like something solid beneath his feet. He continued walking, allowing his steps to come naturally. Each movement became less about forcing himself and more about allowing himself. His body slowly adjusted. His breathing became smoother. His posture straightened slightly, not because he tried to fix it, but because something inside him felt more stable. Time passed without him noticing. At some point he stopped again, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He looked around once more, noticing how ordinary everything was and yet how different it felt. He placed his hands in his pockets and exhaled softly. A final realization began to form, clearer than the others. Every action he took was shaping something unseen. It was shaping how he saw himself. Before, he believed identity came first, and actions followed. Now, it felt reversed. His actions were leading, and his identity was slowly catching up. He thought about the version of himself he had imagined, before, the one who acted without overthinking. That version no longer felt distant, not because he had become that person instantly, but because he had taken a step toward becoming him, and that step mattered more than all the thoughts he had ever had. He looked ahead again. The path was still open, still uncertain, still imperfect. But now, it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt possible. He took another step forward, then another. No rush, no pressure, just movement. And with each step, something quiet but powerful continued to grow inside him. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. A belief that wasn't given to him, and wasn't found somewhere outside, but built, slowly, through action. And as he walked, carrying both his doubt and his progress at the same time, one truth stayed with him, steady and unshaken. Every action was a vote for the kind of person he was becoming. And for the first time, he wasn't waiting to believe in himself anymore. He was building it.